Andrew, what is the most misunderstood thing about space imaging?
We've had space imaging for quite some time. We've maybe been doing space imaging for, 50 years or so. If you kind of like go all the way back to, military systems in the, in kind of like the Cold War era. I think that the most misunderstood thing in space imaging is, how to address kind of the imagery market that exists right now, and then how do you shape this into the future. So we've taken a couple stabs at this, but by and large, government customers have funded 95% of all of the space imaging budgets and space imaging programs. They typically want to operate their own constellations of satellites. They want to collect data that's for their use and for their missions and things. And so you have to, if you're going to, serve imagery to them, you probably want to do that, working directly with them to build satellites. And then I think on the commercial imagery side, you really need to have something that's customers can really want and can really look at. And so that can come in different forms and flavors, but a lot of customers, are in the commercial industry. They need something a little bit more than an image to be successful. Oftentimes, they'll need some sort of analytic product or derived product, from that kind of tells a little bit more of a story, or can plug into a spreadsheet, or can be used as some other business function. And like looking at an image and counting things probably isn't sufficient to be able to do most of those use cases. So yeah, I don't know. That's sort of the market and where we have today.
I always remember that great story about hedge funds using satellite imagery data back in, I don't know, must be 15 years ago now, with counting the cars in Walmart car parks. Do you have a favorite imaging story or use case?
Yeah, I mean, and that was a really interesting story because it was, because we're not sure how often that really like happened or how repeatable or how easy that was to it was almost like a fundraising, maybe Fable or something about how we're going to use this because, it's hard to count all the cars in parking lots and compare that with, looking at analytics data coming from a cell phone or some other way of getting those sort of use case numbers. But I don't know. There's always something different and new and distinct, but it really depends on what the underlying data source is that you're trying to do, and how that works. I know with our technology and our satellites, we do things a little bit differently than existing systems, and so I'm probably a little bit biased in sort of what I'm thinking about right now. But yeah, I don't know as many of the sort of straight optical use cases that have turned out to be really valuable for folks.
So you're building a live 3D map of Earth. That sounds like something straight out of sci-fi. Tell me, has this been possible before? And if not, why? What breakthroughs have made it possible right now?
Yeah, it's a good question. So yeah, we are building a 3D map of the world. We're using special satellites to go ahead and be able to collect that. And it may be helpful to tell a little bit about the story of sort of how I got here and the company got here and to do this. But suffice it to say, the world of space-based radar, which is kind of where we're able to derive these 3D measurements, has been a little bit slower to catch up or maybe to accelerate with the same velocity that we've seen in other in areas of the world that use kind of the same like underlying technology, right? So radar derives a lot of its performance and a lot of its benefits and a lot of its values from the telecommunications industry. Commercial telecommunications industry in the last 20 to 40 years, we've moved from, satellite phones the size of your head and, car phones and all of these things to now we have, cell phones first, and now we have smartphones and they're getting smaller every day and all of these things. And sort of the radars are sort of like still the same size. They kind of still go on the aircraft. They kind of still operate in the same way. And so maybe the technology has been there now that we have the cell phones and all of those things to really make a step forward, but it's been hard. It's been hard to sort of motivate that and accelerate that. You know, some things around defense and kind of the punishing or more difficult research and development environments around that sort of area sort of come to mind. I think it's, you know, maybe this is like the story of space, like 20 years ago, right? Like before SpaceX, it was kind of like a team of experts, and it was all very reliable, and it was all very expensive, and we just had a way to do this particular thing in this particular style. You know, that was sort of it. And then you kind of need to make one of these seismic shifts. Like maybe technology is different. Maybe we can do something different, but how do you sort of catalyze that and make it something new and distinct and make that kind of step change up from where you were? Yeah. I don't know if that makes any sense. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. You mentioned SpaceX. Obviously, that's been one of the huge unlocks in space over the past, decade or 15 years. Would what you're doing be possible before SpaceX brought down launch costs?
No, I don't think so. I don't think so. I mean, it's kind of nuts, that kind of how we used to do things and kind of how we do things now. But it really kind of goes back to, you know, your launch cadence and your risk posture and some of these other things, right? You know, if you're building a satellite and you only have one shot to launch it, and it's a very, very expensive launch, well, you make sure your satellite works, right? You know, you check it. And then you check it again, and then you recheck it, and then you check it 10 times, and every time you check it, then you got to go back and check the other things and check the checking process, and all of a sudden you get this like single satellite. It's still the same thing, but it's, you know, the cost is just going up, and hopefully, you know, it's more reliable, but oftentimes, you know, it's just perhaps checked more, which doesn't actually lead to iteration and cadence and all of these things, and so you end up with a very, very expensive launch and a very, very expensive satellite, and that's how we go. But now, as we've sort of created a faster launch cadence and cheaper launch cadence, if it doesn't work, well, maybe we'll launch another one, right? And when the whole universe doesn't depend on this one satellite launching this well and this way at this time, you know, you have a couple more bites at the apple, then all of a sudden people can like relax a little bit, and they can design things, and maybe they only check it 3 times instead of 30 or something. And then it can be a lot faster. So that has spawned a whole industry of, you know, people who build satellites, and you know, it sounds really complicated, but the satellite is basically just a computer with a couple of specialized pieces of equipment, right? It's a computer with a radio to communicate to Earth, and maybe something to steer it around and point it in the right direction. And then maybe it's whatever the satellite is designed to do, right? The payload for the satellite, right? And that could be a radar, that could be some communications equipment, that could be a camera, right? For observing the Earth with optics. But it doesn't have to be any more complicated than that, right? It's just these couple components. We can build them together. Now we can launch them. And you've seen this just massive decrease in cost of getting a satellite up in space that we see now. And yeah, it's wild. It's having come from kind of a little bit before that in my education, my schooling, to where we are now. It's just been remarkable to see all of these things sort of manifest. And now we get to do so much more in kind of a greenfield opportunity, right? Which I don't know, probably resonates with other, you know, different industries, right? You know, the internet gets created, and then a bookstore on the internet is an amazing company, right? Or rooms and shares on the internet is an amazing company, or banking on the internet is an amazing thing. But as soon as that happens, and all of these things start popping up, I think something similar is happening in space. That is a little bit of investment, more investment time in building a satellite constellation than maybe building a website. But we're starting to come up with many different ideas to try different things. Some better than others, but it is moving things forward, I think, all the time.
When let's talk about the business of space for a moment. So people hear about the space economy and how I'm not sure what the latest figures are, but $300 billion, $400 billion spent per year. just break that down for us. Like, where does most of the money go? What are the biggest businesses in space today? Is it comms? Is it imaging? Is it launch?
Yeah, I know different areas of this business probably much better than I understand other areas of the business, right? I'm not as close to the broader numbers or the individual totals, but I can say a couple of huge things that go on in space. First and foremost being GPS, which we use every single day, or at least I do every day in our lives. It's how our phones know how to get where the phones need to go. Communications and backhaul and all of those things that we need to have this. Broadcast television has been in space for 20 or 30 years. And all those things are very cool. And then maybe my corner of the universe, space-based imaging and remote sensing, kind of understanding the physical world through systems we put it in space. There's probably something like $30 to $50 billion a year globally that we spend on Earth observation satellites of some type and of some flavor. But kind of echoing a point that I said in the beginning of the call, like of that, like a big chunk is NASA, and then a larger chunk is defense customers worldwide. Again, defense customers, the way that defense operates, right, I think is very strange for most people, right? Because it is very counter to their typical experience as a consumer, right? A consumer, you have something that I want, and I see that you have it, and you tell me the price, and then I buy it, right? Maybe it's a little bit more elaborate than this. Maybe there are a couple more stages in this progress, but like generally speaking, this is what we're gonna do. You have a product or service. It's already there. It's finished, and I can go claim that. Government and defense is very, very different from this style. In fact, it's the exact almost opposite, which is like, I want to create something in the world to go perform a defense mission. I'm going to craft it almost from whole cloth, and you, the service provider, are going to help me. So we are going to set out on a journey with a statement of work and some outcomes, and how we're going to go discover a new, better version of, an aircraft carrier or an aircraft or a satellite. We're going to go find some new solution, and I'm going to pay you some money to go develop that thing and go start with what we have, and then research into what we want into the future. It's like applied research and development is the way that government works. And so we have a research and development sort of budget. We have a procurement budget, like maybe after we've created it together, maybe we're going to buy some of it, but it's still going to be pretty custom, and we're going to deliver it there. And then we're going to sustain it, and we're going to operate this hardware that we've created together, this new tank or this new aircraft or this new satellite, on this journey. You'll notice that none of those buckets is labeled buy an image. buy an image, or buy a laptop, or buy a thing. Is like, it's not really part of the game, right? We're going to go build something that somebody else has never created before. And so when you approach a defense customer and you're like, well, this satellite collects imagery for mining companies and for insurance companies and for all, hedge fund, traders, and it can also collect an image for you. They're like, I don't want this. Actually, this feels very unnatural. And you're like, no, it's cheaper because, we can serve lots of different industries with the same camera. And they're like, I don't think you understand. I don't love this model. And furthermore, defense customers are not known for being particularly cost constrained. Cost constraint in defense procurement is not the thing, right? It is much more about the capability, right? And so you approach them and you're like, okay, you have the world's highest resolution satellites that can collect amazing photos of, apocryphal, license plates of cars from space and whatever it is, right? And then you come to them and you're like, but I can give you something much cheaper that anybody can access at any time at much lower resolution. And they're like, this maybe was not what we needed here. So 20 billion is spent on, amazing reconnaissance satellites or something on that order. I don't know the actual number, but it's something in that range. And then a small amount is spent on, commercial companies trying to build satellite constellations and sell the data afterwards. But it's maybe we're discovering some of these things are easier and some of these things are harder. Hopefully that made sense. Yeah.
Yeah, totally. Just listening to you talk about the kind of process of government inventing things. Hey, we want this thing to exist in the world. Our partners are going to help us do it. I often think about the decline in state capacity and the decline in kind of the bits that atoms shift, I guess. Do you think those two things are linked? Do you think it's possible to have truly frontier innovations without the government kind of being that almost forced customer, the one that picks up the R&D tab at the start?
I certainly it can, right? Certainly we have industries that are dominated by private research and development, right? In semiconductors kind of come to mind, like massive R&D budgets to go build a chip that's slightly cheaper, faster, easier, more efficient, all those things.
That's so true, but I guess the government was one that the first customer, right? NASA was like the first customer of semis.
No, you're absolutely right. You're absolutely right. And so that I think, so maybe there's an interesting dynamic here. Maybe there's an interesting thing where, seed capital to go into an industry initially to maybe get it started is useful and valuable and helpful, but we'd like it to transition to whatever extent it can into an easier place. I will also mention something that I think is a really seismic shift that's going on in the defense industry, and I would like to point to this, which is we're going to go do that process. Right? Hopefully this is interesting. I don't know. This may also be like some nerding out here a tiny bit, but we're going to go on this journey, right? And you're the service provider and I'm the government customer. And I say, Stephen, I need a ray gun. And then you might say, well, I've never built a ray gun before. And the government says, I know, it'll be great. We'll build it together. And so you're like, well, I'm going to need some money to go think about building a ray gun, right? And the government says, well, okay, well, I'll pay your costs. And you get the team of experts and we'll proceed, a pace in this development. And they say, well, thank you for covering my costs. I would also like to make a little bit of profit. And the government says, okay, well, I'll give you a little bit more money on profit. It'll be tied to the costs, right? So maybe 6% of all the costs you incur, you get to keep as profit. You then run off having this incentive of the more you spend, the more money you make. And then 15 minutes later, the government's like, hang on. Why does this Hummer have spinning rims? Like, this is not how this thing should go. You're incentivized to spend as much money as you possibly can on this thing called the cost plus contract, right? Cost plus fee contract. We should not do this. We should not do this. Or at least maybe we're not going to do it this way. I'm going to make you write down before we start every single thing that you're going to spend money on, and make sure that those get tracked to an overall requirement that meets the mission objective of whatever it is that we're doing. And you're gonna have this traceability exercise where every dollar you spend should be directly tied back to the objectives that we're actually trying to pay you for, which doesn't actually change your incentives from making it cost as much as possible. It just now changes maybe the way that you go about it, and maybe there's some broader constraints around these things. It's probably better, but it's still not an ideal or an optimal situation. And this is how defense procurement and development has gone on for the last 40 years. And you're like, oh, well, it feels rather inefficient. You're like, yeah, we know. This is the worst process you could, because when you're creating something new, you often don't understand how much step A is going to cost compared to step B, compared to step J. You sort of have to go along and see. But if we've already programmed all the money that you will spend X in A and you will spend X in B, well, I'll find a way to spend X in A and X in B. And so this is like not great. There is an alternative model, of course. It's the model that we use every day in all of the commercial world and all the other things. It's called the firm fixed price model, where we just agree that if you can develop and create X and you're the best, low cost solution, and we have technical understanding, you can maybe get there. Well, just give me X, and whatever you can manage to keep as your profit margin when you create X, well, that can be yours to keep. which is how I bought my laptop and the monitor and the camera and everything else that, you see around me. Is like, somebody had a cost, and I don't know what their cost is. I just know the price, and I buy it that way. And so now the government is starting to move more and more towards this firm fixed price model. And it couldn't possibly be better for what people are doing. But you have this sort of innovator's dilemma type of situation where companies that are very, very good at justifying their costs have this very high cost burden to operate under cost plus models. And then companies that don't have that same cost burden, companies that are able to move a little bit more efficiently, they don't have quite as many people to go manage all of these costs and do all their reporting. They end up doing much better on these firm fixed price models. And so I think you're going to see over the next 20 to 30 years, the rise of companies that operate under this new, maybe Linux operating system of like, we're not going to report everything. We're not going to trace everything up and down. We're just going to deliver really good hardware, and we're going to do it for a lower cost than anybody else. And that's going to be a winning solution for you, the end customer, and the taxpayer ultimately. And I'm very excited to see more of that and less of the sort of pay as you go, pay unlimited, cost incentive sort of program. I think that's going to be a lot better for us to be more on this firm fixed price sort of model as time goes on. Yeah.
So that's generally bad for the primes. Two questions. If you had to pick one prime to survive and thrive over the next 20 years as we move away from cost plus, and then also away from big, expensive, exquisite systems towards, cheap, attritable, mass produced. If you had to pick one prime to make that leap, who would it be? And then if you'd be so kind, give us the 5 new primes 20 years from now when we're doing part 7 of this podcast.
I was thinking,
yeah, I guess you have 3: Anduril, SpaceX, Palantir.
Right. You asked the first question, which I was going to have a really, really hard time with, and then you asked the second question, which is the top 5 primes, and then that was even harder somehow to accomplish. Yeah, I mean, between all of the defense primes that exist right now, I think the one that will be in the best position and in the best place is going to be the one that continues to work with new technology and new companies and can be efficient. And I'm not I don't know that it's entirely clear. I think there are probably some things that are moving in favor. I think some things are moving against. Boeing has a amazing commercial business in addition to its defense business. Is that an asset or is that a liability? I don't actually know. You're tied into a production model and a production style of something that the world very much wants and the world very much needs and would be very difficult to replicate somebody else. But is that going to chain you back to the past? I don't know that I know a great answer. But I do feel like attitudes are changing within these primes, and I think they're looking more for, the same thing that Clayton Christensen recommends in Innovator's Dilemma, which is if you find yourself in an industry and you see a disruptive wave coming and you have some wherewithal to go achieve it, how do you operate? Well, it's not by taking your cost structure and trying to change it and bend it into the new model. It's by opening up an entirely separate division that you hold at arm's length from the parent organization that has a different cost model so that it can enter the market that is emerging. And that's how you can, survive, and that's how you can adapt, and that's how you can move forward into the new era. So I don't know. We'll see there. With regards to the 5 new primes, yes, all of the ones that you mentioned, I think will be here 20 or 30 years from now, and they will be bigger then than they are today. And Anduril and Palantir and SpaceX all fit that bill as companies that can do, that are running this sort of other operating systems, other sort of model, right? The idea that like a Falcon 9 costs what it costs it's kind of a commodity thing, right? You either buy the launch or you don't buy the launch, right? I mean, this is, and never mind what it costs me to produce a Falcon 9. You can find a Falcon 9 mission or a ride somewhere else for lower money. By all means, go find it. But because we have this, this nice product and it's much lower cost than anything else, SpaceX is able to have much better margins on that system than defense primes had on kind of their older model. Even though that older rocket cost much more money, the organization and the incentives were not, sort of aligned to it. So yeah, I'm not sure. There's a part of me that wishes to put Array Labs in this category of space.
I was
prime,
waiting for it
as well. But I think we need to earn it. Some distance between a 30 person organization and the thousands and thousands of people that all of these companies employ. But I think if you are going to make the transition there, the old wisdom is still the true wisdom, right? You gotta figure out your customer. You gotta do something that they actually want, that makes them very happy, that delights them, and that's how you succeed, and that's how you move the ball forward in these different domains. And it's important to never forget that, right? We're here to serve somebody else and build something that they find useful, and changing their behavior too much or constraining them too much or trying to make them go along with your idea has always been something of a challenge in sort of in any business domain. It's nice if you can build something that somebody immediately says, the thing I've always wanted. All right. And when you talk to government customers and you say, well, we're going to build this thing and we're going to take all the development risk and we're going to take all the technology risk and we're going to do this internally, just like the telecommunications companies or the semi companies do when they come out with their next generation of chips or their next generation of boards or Apple, because next generation of the iPhone. I think we haven't really done this in defense because we've had this opportunity for this crutch a little bit, this cost plus sort of edifice. I think we're at a place where we can start moving towards more and more low cost acquisition of all of these things, a little bit more efficient process. And that's going to really open up a lot of efficiency and performance and value for people, who are kind of operating in this area. Yeah.
Before we dig into imaging and what Array Labs is working on specifically, I think about Silicon Valley, Europe and Palo Alto. It was the most important place in the world for technology, for investors over the past 20 years, 25, 30 years, as the software-led, internet-led bull market happened. If we're shifting back to this world of bits and atoms towards what Array Labs is doing in space and nuclear and drones and all these amazing, robotaxis. So Silicon Valley was the most important place over the last 30 years. Where's the most important place over the next 30 years?
Ooh, what an amazing question. And so narrow. I think it goes back to something that other people have said, which is, one of the most important things for us to do collectively as a society, and what I think you're doing here very, very well, with this optimistic view of the world and sort of asking these questions, is you have to sit here and you say, okay, what is the future going to look like that's going to be different from what we have today? And we used to be much better at this. And I think it used to be an easier exercise for us to accomplish, previously. And I think that really is the secret, right? How do you glimpse the future? What does the future look like? Is it vacations on the moon? Perhaps, right? Is it robotic, house cleaner named Rosie the robot, right? I don't know if you remember the Jetsons, but there's this idea, right? Of like we're gonna have the old things, but they're all going to be different and they're all going to be new and they're all going to be fantastic in their own way. And so we think about, well, what would cheaper power truly mean? Wow. I would love to use more power. This is a very, very controversial thing to say, but if we can use more power and we can do that sustainably and responsibly and ecologically, then we should use as much power as we possibly can, because that just helps shape and bend all the rest of the world. It gives us more agency in our day-to-day lives, right? And that really is what the advancement is all about. It's tomorrow I'm going to be able to do something, and I'm going to be able to do it a little bit cheaper or a little bit easier than I was able to do it today. I'm going to be able to do a little bit more with a little bit less. I want to see that future, and I want to see that world, and I want to see that vision manifest, right? So we're going to use more energy. Computers are still going to continue. Computers are going to still become faster. I think that a lot of the work that we are doing, I think a lot of the knowledge work is going to continue to be accelerated by the advent of things like AI. And that's going to start shifting into the physical world and how we build and craft and create products, or we create services, or we create optimized functions for different things, right? I mean, we're talking about AI laying out circuit boards. That's amazing. That's fantastic. That saves somebody so much time. You still need to be an expert to sort of manage that whole process. But now we can get to an 80% or a 90% solution that works well in a fraction of the time than we used to, right? Software and coding is starting to do this. And those things are going to directly manifest and hit in the physical world and continue to hit in the physical world as time goes on. And I'm really excited to see all of those things, happen. And I still think it's going to be places like Silicon Valley and the Bay Area where people tend to congregate, people tend to fly and flock to from all corners of the universe to find these locations where people are in this, flywheel effect, where make a little bit of improvement on A, which leads to a little bit of an improvement on B, and A and B together make C. And then all of a sudden you end up with something that's wild and new, and works so much better than what happened in the past. So, I'll pick that, again, narrowly. But there will of course be all sorts of different places where these things, manifest as well. So, we'll see.
You mentioned energy, so I'll go there. What's your most optimistic view or best idea for what happens when we 10x energy production or 10x energy consumption, specifically in rich countries? Because the answer I usually get to this question is, oh, that's great because, someone in Nigeria is going to be able to live at the same standard as you guys do in America. That's great. I'm really supportive of it. But like, what happens in rich countries? One thing I've often thought about pitching the leaders of Saudi Arabia and the UAE on is, hey guys, we need these big, huge, everywhere in the country. You need these big, giant outdoor air conditioners to have the weather of San Francisco all year round, and you would turn the place into $100 trillion economy overnight.
I have never thought about giant air conditioning, but I think it is a good idea. I will join you in this.
If you can build it, that would be great.
The world, and you're like, oh well, no, I like that idea. But in terms of rich countries and other things, again, like all of your life, the clothes that you wear, the food that you buy, the transportation that you enjoy as you move from point A to point B. All of the things in life that give you agency and give, the electronics we have, it all fundamentally has to come from energy, right? Energy gives us all of these things. It's energy that runs the factories. It's energy that runs the buildings or the air conditioner or whatever it is that is being done. And that energy is kind of the most base currency for, our physical reality. And, you just get to shape it a little bit more and a little bit more easily to whatever it is that you're trying to accomplish. And so, I don't know. I this is an area where, again, I think finding better ways to have that crisp idea, and maybe outdoor air conditioning is like a really, really good one, because we need, as you mentioned before, we need stories, not statistics. Right? We need to have that Jetsons view of, well, imagine when it will be possible for us to just do X or Y or Z, right? Imagine when we'll be flying around in space, or imagine when we'll be flying around in our flying car, or imagine when, right? And so it's like, how do I get places? How do I have things? How do I share things with other people? You know, how do we have a richer experience? And like, you know, is that just screens? Hopefully not, right? There should be something easier where we go. I mean, one of the easiest things for me to contemplate and imagine is, what if reasonably efficient and low cost and much faster transport was available for people in California, right? We have Northern California, we have Southern California. There's some quite distance between the two. We should be able to get from one to the other much more cost effectively and much more conveniently than other ways, right? And so is this like Hyperloop? There's nothing technically wrong with Hyperloop. It's a great idea. It's a much more efficient way of moving things from place to place than you know might otherwise imagine. Will that catch on? I have no idea, but I don't know. There are things like this that could be possible in a Jetsons future, and we should spend a lot of time, more time than we do, conceiving and moving the collective conscious towards a view of abundance and a view of, you know, a little bit better than today, and find out what it is that we want to have, right? While still being in touch with the other things that are truly important, like, you know, our families and our friends and the human connection and human touch around all of these aspects as well. So I don't know. There's all great questions, not simple ones for sure.
Listen, let's get into what Array Labs is building. Give me an overview of the imaging market today. Specifically, what is the state of the art today? And I know you're building something that is 10x better. So just describe exactly what you're building and how it's going to impact the average person, or just to explain it to the layperson, I guess.
Yeah, this is definitely something that I can speak to with a little bit more precision than what will the world look like 50 years from now when we have energy abundance. Okay, so in terms of the Earth imagery market and Array Labs and sort of this thing, we've sort of talked a little bit about how existing systems and existing programs are maybe a little bit more traditional and a little bit slower in how they're conceived and how they're developed, and how we'd like to move to something a little bit faster and more cost effective, leveraging commercial technology. And one of the easiest ways and most obvious things that you can do as you conceive of how do we build better radar systems, it starts with, you know, kind of the input into that funnel, which is who are the people, who are the engineers that we're using to actually create some of these new technologies and new things. And this is, again, an area where defense primes have a little bit suffered thanks to the way that business is incented, which is, you know, if you're a very promising RF engineer or electronics designer and you have an opportunity to work for, you know, Apple or Qualcomm or NXP or one of these other amazing technology companies, and you also have an offer to work for a defense prime and make a third of the money and and have a much different life and outlook, you're like, well, this is not exactly a hard decision to do these different things. You know, we're going to do something that is a little bit it's quite straightforward, right? We're going to do something, a little bit easier. I just noticed that I have another meeting.
You've been super good with your time, so if you have to go, you have to go. We could have a follow-up in a couple of weeks and we could publish it as like a continuation.
I would love to. We sort of have just sort of talked about whatever this was. I can't tell you how fun this conversation has been. I really appreciate all your questions and the care as we kind of go through each of these different industries and imagine a world that's a little bit different than the one that we're living in today. And I love what you're doing, and thank you so much for the time and the opportunity to provide the more of those stories, right, in the world, and how things are going to be better tomorrow than they are right now.